And we are on page 451 of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We'll just start at the top of the page there just to make it easy. And we're at the festival at Surendra's house. And Pratap is talking with Sri Ramakrishna. And they're going to be talking, well, they have talked of Keshab Chandra Sen. He was the leader of the Brahmo Samaj, which was an organization, a spiritual organization during that time, the details of which are not necessary at this point. And so it says that they began to talk about Keshab, and Pratap said, even in boyhood, Keshab showed non-attachment to worldly things, seldom making merry with the other boys. He was a student in the Hindu college. At that time, he became friendly with Satyendra, and through him made the acquaintance of his father, Devendranath Tagore. Wow. Keshab cultivated bhakti, or devotion, and at the same time practiced meditation. At times, he would be so much overcome with divine love that he would become unconscious. The main purpose of his life was to introduce religion among householders. And so that was the idea, I guess, the idea in his Brahmo Samaj. The conversation next turned to a certain Marhata lady. Pratap, some women of our country have been to England. This Marhata lady, who is very scholarly, also visited England. Later, she embraced Christianity. Have you heard her name, sir? So he's asking Ramakrishna. The master, no. But from what you say, it seems to me that she has a desire for name and fame. There's the master always seeing exactly right to the heart of the matter. That kind of egotism is not good. The feeling I am the doer is the outcome of ignorance. But the feeling that God does everything is due to knowledge. God alone is the doer. All others are mere instruments in his hands. So this egotism, what is egotism? Of course, that's the identity with your body and identity with your mind and the stories that causes. That's kind of what egoism is. And it's not helpful, chasing name and fame or lust and greed, which are the things that arise from identifying with body and mind. That's ignorance. And what is ignorance? Ignorance, it is ignorance, right? You're ignoring the reality. You're unaware of the reality, but even worse than being unaware of the reality, you're ignoring it. You're trying not to become aware of the reality, right? And we see this sometimes in the way that in the way that we deal with our vices. We know better, but we continue going down that path, right? And we push that pesky side of ourself, the conscience, or the discerner. We shut it down. We try and kind of cripple it, right? And we slowly work ourselves into our vices in a like the same way you get into a pool, one step at a time. Nothing that shocks you into knowledge, nothing that catches the attention of the self that says, wait a minute, stop, right? Because we want to run in, we want to continue with the story of our ego, the story of who we think we are. And so we want things that keep us on the rails of egoism, this wonderful personality that we love so much, this witty, clever self that we dress up and dance around for others. We enjoy that, we like that. And since we don't know what else there is, or not aware of what else there is, we white knuckle it, we grab onto it and hold on to it. Right? But God is the only doer. That means, this story of egoism is make-believe. And it's not real. The things that it does are not real. It's like the character in a dream. It's doing nothing with nothing, even though it seems like it's doing something, and it seems like there's an effect to the cause. There really isn't. There's nothing there, but we stay in the dream, and we still imagine and hang on to the imagining of being that character in the dream. The misfortune that befalls a man on account of his egotism can be realized if you only think of the condition of the calf, right? The calf says, hama, hama, that is, I. and just look at its misfortune. At times it is yoked to the plow and made to work in the field from sunup to sundown, rain or shine. Again, it may be slaughtered by the butcher. In that case, the flesh is eaten and the skin is tanned into a hide, and from that hide shoes are made, and people put on the shoes and they walk on the rough ground, and still that is not enough it is not the end of the misfortunes. Drums are made from that skin, and then they're mercilessly beaten with sticks. At last, its entrails are made into strings for the bow used in carding cotton. When used by the carder, the string gives the sound tuhu, tuhu, thou, thou. That is, it is thou, O Lord, it is thou. It no longer says, hama, hama, I. Only then does the calf's trouble come to an end, and it is liberated. It doesn't return to the world of action. So, kind of a funny story there, talking about what we have to go through for our realization, to let go of this body and this mind, and to return to ourself, to our infinite, blissed, balanced, unchanging self, right? And that it's this process of getting us to stop saying me and mine. That's mine, this is me, that's mine, right? And come to the place where we say thou, 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 right? Because we are no particular. And so there is no particular to our divine nature. We are infinite, we are everywhere, we are all things. Just as I always mention in the dream, in the dream, even though you choose a particular point from which to experience it, the whole dream is you. But we don't come to know that until we wake up. And so we suffer. We suffer because we are running after desires that have nothing to do with us. We don't know who we are, so we don't know what we want. We don't know who we are, so we don't know what we're looking for. Another way of saying that is that we're looking for God and we don't know anything about God. We don't know where he is. We don't know where we saw him last. We don't know where we left him. And yet we're looking for him. And it's kind of a hopeless condition. And so this suffering, this discomfort keeps us searching, keeps us looking, keeps us asking, what is this all about? Why am I here? What's the nature of these things? And little by little, through this suffering, through this anxiety, through this smallness, eventually we get to the answer. Likewise, when the embodied soul says, "Oh God, I am not the doer, you are the doer. I am the machine and you are its operator," only then does its suffering of worldly life come to an end. Only then does it obtain liberation. It no longer has to be reborn in this world of action, this world of constant, unrepeating change, right? We don't have to be born again into it when we know that we're not the doer, right? We only get the sense of doership by having a body, by having a mind. The mind places us within the context of time, space, and causation. So it looks like there's things to be done. The body limits us, limits our experiences, gives us, breaks the unity of the one without a second into 5 pieces and forces it through these tiny holes of the senses. And it comes into the mind as sound, taste, touch, and smell, and whatever one I'm missing. And then the mind keeps trying to create a unity by arranging it all relatively within its memory banks. And all of this is being done in thought and the make-believe, and so it's not satisfying. We can't figure out why am I not getting anything from this dream, right? How come in my dream I can eat, 12 cows and 15 birthday cakes, and when I wake up, I'm hungry? How did that happen? Well, it's because in this world of constant, unrepeating change, there's nothing to be accomplished. There's nothing you can do because you're only working with thought, right? And thought is not satisfying. It's like what's happening is that this world of constant change is really just the reflection of the self, right? It's like looking in the mirror and trying to kiss the image and wanting it to be fulfilling, trying to build a relationship with that image seen in the mirror, and not understanding why it's not pleasant. Why is it always cold and distant? And so we get stuck in that place. And so he says, that when we come to this liberation, when we're free from that delusion, when we're free from the stories of our ego, from this idea of being limited, at that point, we get our liberation, we get freedom, and we no longer have to be reborn in this world of constant change. And so a devotee asks the obvious. He says, well, how can a man get rid of his ego? And the master says, you cannot get rid of it until you have realized God. If you find a person free from ego, then know for certain that he has seen God. The devotee, well, what, sir, are the signs of this God vision? Master, yes, there are such signs. It is said in the Bhagavata that a man who has seen God behaves sometimes like a child, sometimes like a ghoul, sometimes like an inert thing, and sometimes like a madman. The man who has seen God becomes like a child. He is beyond the three gunas, the tamas, rajas, and sattva, right? Tamas is inertia, depression, laziness, sloth, destruction. That's tamas. Rajas is that person who's just always active, 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 planning, doing, going, being. I've got to get this done. I've got to do that. They're not happy. They can't stand to sit still, right? So that's a person overcome by Rajas. And then Sattva is the proper balance between those two, the balance between Rajas and Tamas. And so he says that the person who's like a child, he's beyond those gunas. He's not affected by them. He doesn't hold on to any of them. And the childlike nature, a child who at one moment may be angry, but 10 seconds later is back to playing again with his friend after their argument, won't give you the ball, and then 5 minutes later just gives it to you for no reason. Like a child like that. He's not bound. He's not convinced of the delusion that's in front of him. He doesn't care. He's just in the moment more than not. And sometimes he says, he is beyond the gunas. He's unattached to any of them. He behaves like a ghoul, for he maintains the same attitude toward things holy and unholy. Right? He comes to know who he is, and he knows that everything is within him. He knows that he's the dreamer in the dream, and he's not the dreamed in the dream, right? And if you know you're dreaming, then you're not bound by the dream. You know that the dream is unreal. You're not stuck by all the things that you're experiencing. And so he acts like a ghoul because he doesn't make the distinctions. There's that story in the Gospel that we're reading, but there's another story where there's this enlightened man who's eating in a pile of trash with the dogs and sharing the leftover scraps with the dog. And Ramakrishna sees him as like, oh, he prays to mother, oh mother, please don't make me that kind of sadhu. Right? And then the guy wanders off, but one of Ramakrishna's disciples runs after him and wants to learn from him. Finally chases the guy down, and the guy turns to him and he says to him, as soon as you can see that this ditch water here and the water running in the Ganges are not different, then you will have reached the goal. Now, if you've been to India, you know that it's not ditch water like it's ditch water here that's just like runoff from the rain. It's the open line of sewage that's in that ditch there. So there it is, the most dirty water that you can imagine. And he says, when you come to know that there is no difference between those two, between the water in the river and the water in this ditch, in this sewage, then you've reached the goal, right? You've come to know that everything is just a thought, that nothing exists that's manifested, that everything is constantly changing, nothing is what it seems. And to live like that, you look like a ghoul to everybody. If you take, imagine taking a bath in the ditch. And to you, it's no different. You don't care. It's not make any, you know that none of this is real. So to everybody else, you're like, oh my God, look at that thing over there. Look at that man. He's eating from the trash pile with the dogs, doesn't care at all. Right? So you look like a ghoul. So you can look like a child, or you can look like a ghoul. And again, like a madman, he sometimes laughs and sometimes weeps. Now he dresses himself like a dandy, and the next moment he goes entirely naked, right? And then roams about with his cloth under his arm. Therefore, he seems to be a lunatic. Again, at times, he sits there motionless, like an inert thing, right? In a perfect contentment, understanding that this world is a dream and there's no need to participate. Nothing is really happening. When he wakes up, there will be no fruit to all the actions that he undertook. So are the number of ways that a man who has had God vision, or a woman, a person who has had God vision, looks like this, can look like any of these things, or at different times, all of them. The devotee, does the ego disappear altogether after the realization of God? Master, yes. Sometimes God totally effaces the ego of his devotee, as in the state of samadhi. But in many cases, he keeps a trace of ego, but that doesn't injure anybody. It is like the ego of a child. A 5-year-old child, no doubt, says I, but that ego doesn't harm anybody. At the touch of the philosopher's stone, steel turns into gold. The steel sword becomes a sword of gold. The gold sword has the form of a sword, no doubt, but it can't injure anybody because gold is a very soft metal. That's why he's saying that. One cannot injure anything or cut anything with a gold sword. Turning to Pratap. You've been to England. Tell us what you saw there. Pratap. The English people worship what you call gold. Of course, there are also some good people in England, those who live an unattached life, but generally one finds there a great display of rajas in everything. I saw the same thing in America. Indeed, you can still see the same thing in America. Lots of rajas, lots of tamas, not much sattva, right? Not many people interested in what's beyond. These days, everything is greed. Everything is lust, whenever everything has a cost, and that's all we're concerned about. How much will it cost? Like that. Time is money. That disgusting statement was born from us. Time is money. But in fact, time is love. All right. Master to Pratap. It is not in England alone that one sees attachment to worldly things. You see it everywhere. But remember that work is only the first step in spiritual life. God cannot be realized without sattva, love, discrimination, kindness, and so on. It is the very nature of rajas to involve a man in worldly activities. That is why rajas degenerates into tamas. If a man is entangled in too many activities, he surely forgets God. He becomes more and more attached to lust and greed. But it is not possible for you to give up work altogether. Your very nature will lead you to it, whether you like it or not. Therefore, the scriptures ask you to work in a detached spirit. That is to say, not to crave the work's results. For example, you may perform devotions and worship and practice austerities, but your aim is not to earn people's recognition or to increase your merit. All right, I'm going to kind of break my normal style here and just ask, does everybody understand what we're reading? Does anybody have a question about it? I can go into all the same examples that I always give and the same stories that I always give, but I've heard that that's tortuous at times. And so if everybody's understanding what he's saying, then we'll just continue to read on. Yes, Frank?
Well, one thing I've been battling with, and I'm glad this brings it up, the doer.
The doer.
When the woman first started speaking and he said, that's someone after name and fame and that. And you were talking about people who keep doing behaviors thinking they're going to get something out of it. This always confused me. If I'm not the doer and God is the doer, then I'm not bench eating. Like I get confused. Well, if I'm not the doer, then I'm not bench eating. If I rob a bank, well, God's the doer. So I get confused with I'm not the doer, but I'm supposed to meditate and do this. And I always battle with that doer thing.
Yeah, the thing that makes us feel like we're the doer is the identity. We don't realize that we're just watching a dream. Like when you're in a dream, there's two ways to not become the doer. One is to realize that you're in a dream, right? In the dream, you can build as many houses as you want. No houses are being built. So you're not doing, right? but you think that you are. So you can go in and out of those houses and you can enjoy those houses, even though they don't exist. When you wake up, you're still going to be where you were. Nothing will have changed. And so in that sense, we're a doer. And as long as we're in that dream and we're convinced that we're in that dream and we're convinced that it's real and that we're doing these things and building these houses and making these things happen, we bear the karma of that, the results of that, the feeling of that. We've identified with that particular in the dream. Even though in the dream you are everything, you've just become that singularity in there, that point of reference. And as long as you believe that, you're going to suffer the consequences of being a doer because you think you are, right? As soon as you come to the knowledge that you're not the doer, that you're in the dream, that changes the nature of the dream completely, right? When you've come to know that you're dreaming, you realize that the dream is you. You realize that it is within you and that you are actually the dreamer that has become everything in that dream and is just arbitrarily identifying with a particular point of perspective. But you can wake up when you want. So you know that there is no doing, there is no happening, there's nothing there. And so you're not suffering. You won't suffer from it anymore.
So am I really not binge eating?
You're really not binge eating. Yeah, you're really not binge
But
eating.
I'm really gaining weight.
Seemingly, but it's dream weight.
Okay.
It's Brahman weight.
Yeah.
Right. So these things that seem to be happening, I mean, from the perspective that we actually think and feel, these things seem crazy. But remember that you were able to fly in your dream last night, and you experienced it, and it was wonderful, but it wasn't happening, and you can't fly, right?
So Swamiji, to add to that, right? So how do we reconcile? Swami Vivekananda said, right, good, good, bad, bad, none escapes the law. Those who wears the form, wears the chain, right? So basically he's talking, you do good, good, bad, bad, whatever that happens. And if you're bound by both good or bad, you wear a chain, right? So how does this reconcile with the not being the doer and all that?
Same thing. Those teachings happen when you think yourself to be the doer. He's talking to you as the deluded soul who thinks he's doing.
So if you are so immersed in ego and you go do all this, like eating, rob a bank and all, you will face the consequences of the ego. But if you're about that,
not the consequence of the ego, not the consequences of the ego necessarily. I mean, yes, but that's an abstraction. It's the consequences of your actions. And it's because you believe yourself to be mind, and you believed yourself to exist in your mind, right? So you live as the thought of yourself. That's why you're a thought among thoughts, right? And those thoughts affect you. Your mind stores up your actions and its results. And your mind keeps you accountable to your own karma. It's not God that's out there as a third party keeping track of your karma, like Santa Claus in the sky, who's naughty and who's nice. You carry it. You're the one. You know that you hit your mother this morning, and that knowledge makes you feel horrible about yourself. You suffer for it. You know that you cheated on that test, and so you can't enjoy the good grade that you got. So you carry your own karma within your own self, and to get rid of that, to break out of that, we have to come to this state of sattva, which is we have to counter these bad actions, with actions that are good. And what are actions that are good? Actions that lead to unity, to oneness, or actions that are in harmony with your nature, Satchitananda. Actions that are motivated by an unconditioned love. Actions that are rooted in an inherent wisdom in yourself.
So in a way, Swamiji, you replace the binge eating with something more sattvic or more aligned with the God or unity.
Well, not necessarily. Well, yes, that's the path he's talking about here. But on the path of knowledge, you can just realize that you're dreaming and that food isn't real, and it's not. You're not a body, so you stop identifying with the desires of the body to have taste and food and whatever that it's looking for, and you graduate from that. You're no longer affected by it. Once you know you're not the body, you can make it funny and say, like, suppose you imagine that you're a horse, And so every month you have to go and get your horseshoes put on. And so you go and they nail that thing into the bottom of your foot and you're like, ah, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then at some point you're like, hey, I'm not a horse. Why do I have to get horseshoes every month? Right? I never was a horse. And so you kind of break the cycle of your karma based on your attachment, your wrong idea of what you are, of who you are. Right? And that only happens through discernment. And it's not a matter of belief. It's not a matter of belief. These if you go in and discern, you will clearly see that you are not the body. You will clearly see that you are not the mind. Right? That will become obvious to you when you start paying attention. Because that's one of the first things you realize when you go inside. You realize my body has to report to me. My mind has to report to me. I don't know what my mind and body are or what they're up to or how they're feeling unless they report to me. My body gives me signals, bad taste in the back of my mouth, a headache and a fever. And oh, I'm sick. No, you're not sick. Your body is sick, right? Or the mind, you put you in a mood. You can't seem to treat people nicely because you're just being cranky. And so, so the mind is informing you that it's in a bad mood, but you are identified with it. So you say, I'm in a bad mood. You don't say the mind is in a bad mood. But when you go inside and you see this clear fact that these things report to you that they are by necessity not yourself, then you become aware of their qualities and the way they interact and how they create story. And you realize that the self, which is the observer, doesn't have to be subject to those things, right? And you can see that it's your choice to be subject to it or not quite easily. The funny one is, my mother would she had 3 sons, my 2 brothers and me, and we would sit and watch Tom and Jerry in the afternoon. And my mother would be out there mowing the lawn, right? And she'd come in and, yell in the kitchen window, will somebody come out here and help me with the trimming? But all of us are watching and we hear it, but you don't hear it. You're a teenage son. You're sitting there. You're like, you don't hear it. Second time, third time, she comes in. She's standing at the back of the couch with a paddle in her hand. Get outside and help me trim. Well, then suddenly you hear it, right? Same thing like you smell a rose, smell it 5 times, you can't smell it anymore. So you see, it is attachment and identity that allows us to experience and subject ourselves to the pain of things, right? And we have to go in and discern and come to the knowledge, wow, this isn't who I am. And then you can detach from it, let go of it, and then it no longer causes your suffering. But you can only learn that when a teacher like Vivekananda is willing to step into the bathtub with you and say, hey, this is how you get out of the bathtub. All right, stand up and step over this ledge. That's how you get out. So we have to pretend that these things are real because we all think these things are real. So our teacher has to pretend they're real and talk to us as if they're real to help us get out, to help us find the way out. And so that's why, that's why Ramakrishna talks about this. That's why we have karma, even though in truth, we don't have any karma. If we're not the doer, you can't have karma. But to the extent you believe you're the doer, to that extent you believe you're responsible for what is done. And to the extent that you feel responsible for what is done, to that extent you suffer or you celebrate or whatever it is you're going to feel from those things. Does that help? At all?
I need to give it time to process it.
Excellent. Yes, that is absolutely the right answer. Because if you understood it, you'd be done. You'd be in samadhi back there. All right. All right. So if a man is entangled in too many activities, he surely forgets God. He becomes more and more attached to lust and greed. But it is not possible for you to give up work altogether. You can't just decide to quit, right? Because your karma, it's kind of like the tumblers in a combination lock. It's like you can't just open the lock. You have to go through the process, and then the tumblers will allow you to release. The karma, your mind holds the karma, locks you into mind, locks you into wrong identity, until you hit that combination, Satchitananda, and are motivated only by those things and not by things of the body and things of the mind, and then the lock pops open, then you can leave. But you can't just cut it, right? If you're going to cut it, you have to take the path of bhakti. Right? And then you have to do the work of understanding grace and learning how to accept grace. And that's the same as what the Jnani is doing by just trying to get the right combination of understanding and letting go of his attachments and being released from the mind that way. All right. It's not impossible to do it all together. Your very nature will lead you to it, whether you like it or not. The mind is the wheel of samsara. It's rolling down the hill. And you believe that to be you, right? Because you're living as the thought of you in the mind. And so what the mind does to you, you suffer from. You experience as your own, as if it is your very own thing. So it's not a matter of whether you want to do it or not. It's the matter that you've accepted the fact that you are the mind and you are the body. So now you have to suffer with those things, the mind and the body. And the suffering comes because the mind and body are temporary. They aren't immortal, ever free, ever pure, ever blissful like you are, right? Are we getting any closer? Anybody have any other questions or want to poke at that beehive anymore? All right. So therefore, the scriptures ask you to work in a detached spirit, right? Stay in the moment and do things for their own sake. Don't work for results. Whatever's in front of you, do it. But apply Satchitananda, apply pure love to it, apply wisdom to it. And when you're done with it, offer it and let go of it and pick up the next thing. So in a detached spirit, don't get pulled into the story. When you have a result that you're running after, you're caught in a story. And it doesn't mean anything. You'll fill that result, and there's just going to be one more thing to do after that, and then another thing to do after that. You will never reach a goal that way. A rich man never has enough money, right? A person indulging in sense pleasure never gets enough. A person who likes food can never eat enough. Why? Because everything has an expiration date. Even if you accomplish it, it has to be accomplished again. That's the nature of the senses. And so through this discernment, we give up. We're like, forget it. And as soon as we really, truly forget it, we're free, right? No longer beholden to it. So the scriptures ask you to work in a detached spirit, that is to say, not to crave the work's results. For example, you may perform devotions and worship and practice austerities, but your aim is not to earn people's recognition or to increase your merit. To work in such a spirit of detachment is known as karma yoga, but it is very difficult. We are living in the Kali Yuga. It's the nature of this age, so it's the Kali Yuga. And he says, when one easily becomes attached to one's actions, you may think that you are working in a detached spirit, but attachment creeps into the mind from anybody knows where. You may worship in the temple or arrange a grand religious festival or feed many poor and starving people. You may think that you have done all of this without hankering after the results. But unknown to yourself, the desire for name and fame has somehow crept into your mind. Complete detachment from the results of action is possible only for one who has seen God, who has known the reality. You've caught a glimpse of not being body-mind. Right? You've caught a glimpse of Satchitananda itself, that unconditioned love. And you're no longer able to be convinced that the movie is real, right? You're not able to believe that anymore. Yes?
So Swamiji, is desire for God realization or seeing God, isn't it a desire also?
It's a desire, but it's not a binding desire because you are God. So to desire what you already have doesn't cause you to go out and try and get something because you already have it.
So, okay, you are like Atman and Brahman and then the God.
Yeah, you are that. You are the thing you seek. And so to have a desire for what you are is not a binding desire. It's a desire that will actually lead you to freedom.
So it's basically desiring to see the real reality or real self.
Yes, in one sense of terms, it's the desire to see God for the bhakta. It's a desire to see the ultimate reality for the jnani. So, and those things, that's not a binding desire. It doesn't lead you into more delusion because you're actually trying to find the unity which is virtue.
Because sometimes it bothers me, like, why am I desiring God? Isn't it a desire? But thank you.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. It's desiring what you already have, which is a wonderful state to be in. You don't have to go through the headache of getting it. All right. But a lot of times that seeking, it's like becomes a desire for name and fame. You want to be known as a holy man. You want to be known as a virtuous person. You want to be, and so all of your actions, this is very apropos to us as spiritual seekers. It's one of the dangers is that when the practices that are supposed to be leading you out of ego actually start adding to your ego, you're in a very difficult place because the things that are supposed to be setting you free are binding you. And that's when the teacher will give you a weird practice like stop meditating. I don't want you to meditate for 6 months. It's like, don't go to the center. I don't want you going to the center for, 6 weeks, or, things that seem contrary, but because you have made those things start to build a spiritual ego, you've gotten yourself into trouble. And so you have to get back to a neutral point and then go back and do it right, do it again, ruin that reputation of being a good person by not going to the temple. That's only when your teacher tells you in the extreme cases. All right. So he says, you may think that you're working in a detached spirit, but that attachment creeps into the mind from nobody knows where. You may worship in a temple or arrange a grand religious festival or feed many poor and starving people. You think you've done all of this without hankering after those results, but unknown to yourself, okay? And this is why we don't want that to happen. We don't want to live a life where we start doing things unknown to ourselves, which means you're not discerning. You're not paying attention, right? You're not watching the mind. And so you're involved in all these things unawares. You don't realize what you're doing. But unknown to yourself, the desire for name and fame has somehow crept into your mind. Complete detachment from the results of action is possible only for someone who has seen God, a devotee. Then what is the way for those of us who have not seen God? Must they give up all duties of the world? Master, the best path for this age is bhakti yoga, the path of devotion. The path of bhakti described by Narada, to sing the names and glories of God and to pray to him with a longing heart. Oh God, give me knowledge, give me devotion, reveal yourself to me. The path of karma is extremely difficult. Therefore, one should pray, God, make my duties fewer and fewer. And may I, through your grace, do the few duties that thou givest me without any attachment to the results. May I have no desire to be involved in any activities. It is not possible to give up work altogether. Even to think or to meditate is a kind of work. As you develop love for God, your worldly activities become fewer and fewer of themselves, and you lose all interest in them. Can one who has tasted a drink made of sugar candy enjoy a drink of ordinary molasses? Right? The devotee. The English people always exhort us to be active. Isn't action the aim of life then? Right? Master, the aim of life is the attainment of God. Work is only a preliminary step. It can never be the end. Even unselfish work is only a means. It is not the end. Sharabu Malik once said to me, please bless me, sir, that I may spend all my money for good purposes, such as building hospitals and dispensaries, making roads and digging wells. I said to him, it will be good if you can do these things in a spirit of detachment, but it's very difficult. Whatever you may do, you must always remember that the aim of this life of yours is the attainment of God and not the building of hospitals and dispensaries. Suppose God appeared before you and said to you, accept a boon from me. Would you then ask him, oh God, build me some hospitals and dispensaries? Or would you not rather pray to him, oh God, may I have pure love at your lotus feet. May I have your uninterrupted vision. Hospitals, dispensaries, and all such things are unreal. God alone is real and all else unreal. Furthermore, after realizing God, one feels that he alone is the doer and that we are but his instruments. Then why should we forget him and destroy ourselves by being involved in so many activities? After realizing him, one may, through his grace, become his instrument in building many hospitals and many dispensaries. Right? So it's not what you do that's so important, it's how you do it. Right? So yes, you go build your dispensaries, not because you're trying to do anything in particular, but because you're obeying God in one sense of language, but also in the sense that you are being true to your nature of Satchitananda, right? So you do good, as it were, as because it's your nature to do good. You alleviate suffering because it's your nature to alleviate suffering. You don't get into the particulars of it. I'm going to relieve the suffering of that person over there, right? Because then that's karmic. You're assuming that you can help somebody, that you, as an ego self, can do something in this world that will change somebody else. It can't be done. If you do it that way, that's how you get trapped. Rather, you do it because it's your nature to do it, and that's enough. You do it for love's sake. You love for love's sake. You're kind because it's your nature to be kind. You could be kind because it feels good to be kind, but then you're going to get trapped, because then you're going to expect return from that. You want that person to appreciate your kindness. You walked out. Do you ever walk? I remember when I moved to the East Coast, and I didn't think people were all so very friendly. Because in California, you say hi to somebody, they always say hi back. Somebody will argue with me about that, but nonetheless, that was my experience. And I found that on the East Coast, when I was saying hi to people, I was looking at them with expectation, like, answer me back. Right?
Swamiji, it always appeared to me, like, at least in a lot of experiences, when I do something good, at least I think I did good for them. And I'm not even expecting a thank you or anything, but then sometimes it happens that they turn against me and say, like, as if I have did something wrong, or it's like, don't even thank me, that's fine. I did it because I wanted to. But then I think the negative reaction to that being helpful to somebody, that kind of, I think, is harder to digest in terms of.
But see, there's still expectation there. Expectation still exists.
So it's not just like you are expecting something positive, but you're also expecting it not to be negative.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Or you're associating the meaning to what you've been doing. Obviously, if you're doing positive things for someone and they strike out at you, obviously that has nothing to do with you. Obviously they're misunderstanding. They've got their own story going on that's causing them that. And if you are without expectation, if you are doing it just because you're living according to your nature, you're not going to blame yourself for it. You're not going to get involved with it. You're going to be like, the person has something going on. And that can awaken even more compassion or a desire to alleviate suffering, or not a desire, but kick in that nature of yours to alleviate suffering.
Right. And I think about what Swami Vivekananda said, like, if you can help your brother. If not, just fold your hands and pray for them and move on.
Right. In one place he says that, but in another place he says, you cannot help anybody in this world. Who are you to think that you can help somebody? Do you think that God is unable to run the world, that he needs you to help? So he again shows that same idea.
Yeah, I just want to say, I get confused with like contradictions like that. And you were just reading a little bit earlier about the one goal is to attain God. But if I am God, how do I attain God?
It's attain the knowledge that you are God.
Okay.
It is a trick in Vedanta when you talk about these things, you have to keep track of where the pin has been put in the map.
Yeah.
Because it is relative. If there's a truth like you are not the doer, and you don't see that you're not the doer, but you take that truth and try to apply it to your life, it's going to be messy because you don't believe it's true and you can't sincerely practice that or do that. And so you have to know, that's within the context of realization. So I can't really take that truth now. I can put that truth in my pocket and sort of know it ultimately to be true, and sometime I'm going to figure it out and know it. but it's not something you can actually use right now. And so you always have to know where your own pin is. You have to admit, I think I'm the doer. I think I'm a man. I think
so. Is that sort of what Swamiji meant when, in one sense, when he said, if you could help, help, and that's on one level, but on another level, you can't do anything because everything is relative on the level we're looking at.
That's exactly right. You always pay attention to who he's talking to.
Yeah.
Right? Who's the audience
I'm
is.
important, but I'm not important. What I do is important, but it's not important. And both exist simultaneously.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And it depends on your level of consciousness, where you're at. And the instructions, that's why we have gurus, because there's not one teaching fits all. We're all at different places in different parts of the process. And you'll get different instructions based on where you're at from your guru. You know, we see that even in the gospel. You know, one of Ramakrishna's disciples defended him on the boat and threatened to sink it when he heard people on the boat bad-mouthing his guru. But that was his weakness, was that he was very egotistical and very, you know, kind of doing that kind of thing. And so
everything's okay. You know, what you said makes sense, because even as a therapist, I will say different things to different clients depending on, are you coming to me as an addict? Are you coming to me as an abused woman? Are you coming to me, who are you coming to me with? You know?
yes.
Because if somebody who's not an addict says, oh, I felt like going out and having a drink, I may say, well, why not do that?
Yeah.
But if an addict said that, I'd be like, wait, let's talk.
Oh, let's talk about this.
So yeah, know your audience.
So you understand fully.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's exactly what's going on here. And that's why these contradictions exist.
Okay.
So when they happen, look at who they're talking to, look at the context of the teaching, what assumptions are being made. And then it comes to light in them. Yeah. All right. Blah, blah, blah. Therefore, I say again that work is only the first step. It can never be the goal of life, right? Because you're dreaming and there is no result. It's not actually happening in one sense of looking at it. Devote yourself to spiritual practice and go forward, right? Don't keep your eyes on the results. This is one of the new things that I started practicing a while back, as many of you who we've been together, you kind of know, that this idea of sitting to meditate, if you sit with the idea of being the doer, that you're going to meditate, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, meditation doesn't, it's quite frustrating, you know, because you can't seem to get that good meditation that you once had. You're being goal driven. Meditation is a surrender, right? It's a knowing that you are already realized, that you just have to realize that you're realized, and you know that the divine is the doer. And so Mother is working on you, or God is working on you, or the divine principle is working on you while you meditate. It's yours just to be available, to sit in the presence, enjoy the presence, assume your realization, assume grace, assume the love of God, and sit there and enjoy that and let Mother do her thing, right? Don't be goal driven.
So Swamiji, I think we live in a world where somebody asks, who are you? You'll say, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a therapist, or
you'll describe
I'm a
yourself.
Scientist, right? So it's kind of like what he's saying. You're identifying yourself with the work you do.
Yeah. And that's one of the famous things that I like that Nisargadatta said. You know, he says the ignorant man describes himself from the outside in. You know, I'm American. I'm 60 years old. I'm a Swami. I'm a. But he says the holy man describes himself from the inside out. If you try to do that, you'll realize there's nothing to say. There's no boundaries inside.
But it's like almost feels like you're going against the tide in a way.
Well, you are, of course. Maya inverts everything. Up becomes down and down becomes up. Just a moment ago, a little while ago, we were doing the Katha Upanishad class, and we were talking about freedom. You know, if you ask an ignorant man what freedom is, he says, "Oh, it's my freedom to do whatever I want," right? Because that seems like freedom to a man who's identified with the body mind. But in fact, to a realized soul, doing whatever you want is absolute bondage, because you have no desire. Those desires are coming from the body and coming from the mind, and they are not you. So you are being forced to work for something that is not you. So freedom is to have no desire for the realized soul. But for the deluded soul, freedom is to be able to do whatever you desire. So you see how Maya can take it and just literally flip it 180 degrees.
So Swamiji, I always wondered, right? So like Swami Vivekananda, he was already realized before he even came to America, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why did he do that if he did not? He already knew he was that, right? But then he worked so tirelessly for almost 10 years.
Yeah, well, in his mind, we saw him as the doer, but he wasn't the doer. He was following the promptings of his nature, from within. His nature was to alleviate suffering, and he went where he was led to go, where quote circumstance or God took him or opened the doors for him to go through. But for him, he wasn't doing. For him, he was being. In that sense.
Okay, so he wasn't doing because he was Vivekananda or his ego. He was just doing where he took and.
Right. Yeah. There wasn't much ego. There was some ego there. He says that, but you have to have some ego to have a body to manifest. But yeah, no, he wasn't ego driven, in that sense. He was surrendered, and he was doing the work of Mother, and he didn't do anything without getting Mother's permission, and yeah. So from that perspective, he was acting according to nature, to his nature, within the context that was in front of him. So there wasn't a sense of doership, for the most part. His delusions, if he had any, were by choice. He could walk away from them at any point. And in the end, he did. He had that boon. He could leave the body when he wanted to. He knew that he was in a dream, and he was in charge of the dream. And when he was done, he walked out of it. Like that. Once, how are we looking at here? Oh, it's 10 my time. All right, so let's go ahead and stop there for this week. Turn off